Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. We got a World War III alert. World War III alert. All out war. But before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, we got it. Revolutionaries for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I got some revolutionary dinner for y'all. Let's get into the content. The hardest working newsman in the business is back.
Iranian retaliation for the latest U.S. attack has just begun. An Iranian military official told Noor News that IRGC launched a massive attack on July 8, 2026, against U.S. bases in the region, in response to U.S. airstrikes on Iran. According to the official, the ceasefire, which lasted only 2 weeks, appears to have ended, and the war started by the Americans, this time, will be fought without compromise, an eye for an eye. CENTCOM launched a massive airstrike campaign beginning on July 7, targeting more than 80 sites in southern Iran. So far, U.S. airstrikes have reportedly taken place in 6 coastal cities in Iran: Bandar Abbas, Keshem Island, Bushehr, Chabahar, Sirik, and Kanarik. The IRGC Naval and Air Forces, through joint missile and drone operations, announced that they have struck 85 key U.S. military facilities. Although IRGC did not specify all the targets, videos have emerged confirming the impact of powerful explosions in Bahrain and Kuwait, the main hosts of U.S. military bases, which were the first to be targeted. In Bahrain, plumes of red smoke rose above the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet base, following reports of Iranian ballistic missile attacks and explosions in the vicinity. In Kuwait, as seen in a video apparently captured by a Kuwait airport CCTV.
Then Israel told us, man, the Iranians want to kill him. It's all over the news, CNN reporting it. He said that several times. I believe he do believe it's Iran, but it's Israel. And they will kill him if he don't get back to World War III. They want nuclear wars. Too many people on this planet. I'm warning people what's going on. And Trump ain't in no position not to do the mistake he made, bombing Iran again, and Iran is making them pay. The U.S. is trying to lie about the destruction that's taking place, but we're going to correct the lies.
CCTV camera, the ground-based Patriot missile defense system, was seen launching a barrage of interceptor missiles. Massive explosions rocked and shook the port area, and the U.S. military base at Ali Al Salem Air Base, which deploys a large number of missions to intercept Iranian ballistic missiles. But, before the missiles could intercept their targets, the sound of successive explosions caused by missiles that successfully penetrated the defenses could be heard clearly. In addition, a U.S. Air Force MQ-9 Reaper drone was successfully destroyed at dawn that day, reported Sardar Mohammadi, a spokesperson for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Video from the IRGC Air Defense Unit's electro-optical surveillance cameras shows the moment the $34 million hostile drone was shot down by the latest air defense system in Khorramshahr, Bushehr province. IRGC warned that U.S. bases in UAE, Qatar, and elsewhere could be targeted in future operations.
Donald Trump is shaking as the death threats against him are escalating at the Ayatollah's funeral, as the funeral has moved from Iran to Iraq and back to Iran. We've been seeing all of these signs and massive banners threatening Donald Trump's life. Now, Netanyahu had a call with Donald Trump in the past 24 hours talking about assassination plots and death threats against him from Iran. But you need only look at the crowds in Iran who are absolutely furious at the Ayatollah's funeral, at the procession, both in Iran and Iraq. We've seen the signs everywhere. And then earlier, we saw a massive Lego float that the Iranians who were there burned, like they burned the effigy, this massive Lego float of Donald Trump. They lit on fire, and lots of people were wondering, what is this? Why are they bringing out this massive Lego Trump in Mashhad? And then it turned out because they were burning it. Here is just some signs on the building that you see. Here are some of the signs that the mourners, the millions of people who were there, were holding up. Let me show you as this gigantic, massive Lego Trump is rolled out on this crane. You can see for yourself. And then indeed, they burned that massive Lego Trump.
The problem Trump got is they really want him dead for killing a supreme leader. Compared to the supreme leader, he's nobody to them. And Israel absolutely will assassinate him, blame it on them to drag the U.S. deeper in the war. And I think that's what Trump really scared. And I think that's why his people scared, because Israel told him that the assassination was real, told him that today, is all over the news. And it's because they would do it and blame it on Iran.
I will show you what that looked like. And this took place in one of Iran's biggest cities as well, Mashhad. You can see this was the last day of the Ayatollah's procession. Here, play this clip. Now, as I noted before, Israel recently shared intelligence with the United States indicating that Iran was considering a new plot to assassinate Donald Trump. The Wall Street Journal reports, citing people familiar with the matter. Here's the article right here. Iran hatched fresh plot to kill Trump, Israel told the U.S. Israel recently shared new intelligence with the U.S. that they showed Iran was considering a new plan. Did they show those photos and the processions where there were signs everywhere, I guess, is my question. Also, the Prime Minister of Israel's account says that they also told Donald Trump that the Turkish President Erdogan has made very severe statements against Israel and the threats that are being made by Turkey against Israel, according to this account right here. Now, we've been hearing from Donald Trump about being the number one person on Iran's assassination list. That's what Donald Trump said aboard the Air Force One. It should be noted yesterday, Donald Trump did not fly back from Turkey on the Qatari Air Force One. He flew back on the old Air Force One, and most people believe it was out of security concerns over potential assassination attempts, because the old Air Force One has the defensive capabilities to potentially deter missiles and drones and rockets, and the new Qatari Air Force One doesn't. Here's what Donald Trump said about being on a list. Play this clip.
Possibly think you tried. Well, I mean, if they asked you to close your windows, probably they'd feel that way. They didn't ask me to close mine, but if they did, I would have done it. You know, these are sick people, so I could see something like that. I didn't know they did that, but I could see something.
Were you aware of any credible threat?
Oh, these are sick people. You killed the supreme leader of Shia Islam, brother. You in trouble. That's why he really pissed. You in trouble. They don't respect you. They want all the smoke. They're not scared of your army. They've been defeating the U.S. and Israel. But it's not the Iranians that's going to do it to him. It's the Israelis that's going to do it to him if he don't drag the U.S. further into a war they can't win. Wreck our economy. A wrecked economy is good for them. They make all the money off that type of stuff. Because when these countries can't pay their debt, who the hell you think go swoop in and buy everything up? The same people who've been doing it for centuries.
By Iran against Air Force
Well, I have it
One.
read all the time. I'm number one on their list before you. But if I go, you go, right?
But was there a specific
So perhaps someday you want to change professions.
And then Donald Trump also said at the NATO summit that he was top on the list. And he talked about being the president. You have about a 5% chance of being assassinated. Here, play this clip.
It's a very dangerous profession. No, I'm number one on the kill list for Iran. They're lovely people. I'm number one. So I don't know. I can't tell you that, but I don't really care because I'm doing my job and I'm doing it, I hope, better than anybody's ever done it, because we have a country that's hot and really, really successful. But I mention it only because it's on the list. I mean, it came out. There was another list came out yesterday, and I'm number one on. I like being number one on TikTok better, but I'm number one on the list for killing.
Then earlier in the day, during one of the sessions that Donald Trump was speaking at while he was sitting, he mused about getting assassinated and said, "So far, I guess I've been a little lucky, but maybe that doesn't last very long. That's how it goes." Here, play this clip.
In trouble for 47 years, and we took out their first set of leaders. We took out their second set of leaders. They want to take out the U.S. leader, me. I'm on every list. I saw things this morning. I'm on every single one of their lists. And so far, I guess I've been a little bit lucky, but that maybe doesn't last very long because that's the way it goes. But we have great people. But these are evil, sick people, and we have to rid their cancer. Their cancer. You know what you do? You got to cut out cancer early. Man, that's the way I feel.
Then Donald Trump talked about how roadside bombs and others, as you're driving around, it just blows off your face so you have no legs or anything. Here, play this clip.
They had the roadside bomb, Soleimani. I took care of him first term. And that was a big thing because I think he probably would be a lot stronger had he been around because he was a bad guy, but he was an evil genius, but a bad guy. And he was the father of the roadside bomb. The roadside bomb is a bomb that goes on when you're driving your little vehicle around, and it goes on and you have no legs, no arms, and no face. And they've killed thousands and thousands of people.
Now, it should also be noted that I think one of the reasons that Donald Trump has been saying that he wants to build this ballroom is he's terrified of all of these assassination attempts that he believes are taking place, at least. Donald Trump says that the new ballroom, this is what he said before heading to the NATO summit, will be missile-proof and will have a drone port. Here, play this clip.
But we were able to get 921 people in, and this will hold many times that numbers of people without the tables as seats, and bulletproof, drone-proof, missile-proof in many cases, and beautiful at the same time. And a big military component, including on the roof, a drone port. Can you believe we have a drone port? And it's like no other. So we're doing a great service. It's great national security. We also take care of a need. Every president said, this is crazy.
And then one of the odd things that he kind of constantly says at all of these pressers is he refers to the questions that are being asked of him as kill shots. So before he left to go to the NATO summit, he said to Michael Dell, "Those questions, Michael, they're all kill shots. They're all kill shots." Here, play this clip.
Every question's a kill, you know that. Every question's a kill. Right?
Sir, we don't have a helicopter. We have a delicopter.
And then when Trump was on Air Force One, he concluded the gaggle by saying, "Every question is a kill. Every question you ask me is a kill," he says. Here, play this clip.
And every question is a kill. But then we have Daniel
by Pepe Escobar, independent journalist and geopolitical analyst, and we are going to break down the latest news. So first, okay, Pepe. So first, the United States overnight completed another round of strikes for the second straight day. They claim over 91 targets were hit this time on top of the 80 plus the day before. Iran is saying that over 14 people and 78 have been wounded in these strikes, and they have retaliated, Iran has, with strikebacks of their own, including on a Patriot missile battery in Kuwait, an early warning radar in Qatar, fuel storage in Bahrain, 2 U.S. bases in Bahrain, including the Fifth Fleet, have come under attack. And we also have targeting of an airbase in Jordan this morning, or for Iran this afternoon, which included hypersonic missiles used to fire about 10 ballistic missiles in Azraq, Jordan, to destroy a command and control center. This just touches the surface. You reported, Pepe, that some of the U.S. strikes have targeted railway. Iran is saying that major infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, has been targeted, including a railway between Iran and Turkmenistan that connects to China, the Chabahar harbor, the port, a key node for Russia, Iran, India transport, and the Mashhad-Tehran railway, which in Mashhad, the Ayatollah, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is, as we speak, being buried there now. So, Pepe, so much to catch up on. How about you help us understand? Maybe let's just focus on the last 24 hours and what makes day 2 significant as we see a restart of all-out war, at least teetering toward that.
Well, first of all, greetings, Danny, greetings all of you. I am at my new refuge in the garden in Natostan, which could not be a deeper contrast to all the horrors around us. So here, at least we can maintain a little bit of sanity, but you enter the studio and you look at all the equipment and you see what's coming out, and it's hell. It's absolute hell. Well, we are all very worried about the perversity, the crassness, the stupidity, and how nefarious is the empire of chaos, plunder, piracy, and lies, of course. These bombings from yesterday to today, and they will continue, they are not only against so-called military installations along the Persian Gulf. If you look at what was bombed along the Persian Gulf, it's a lot. It starts near Karg in the west, and it goes all along to the port of Chabahar in the southeast, close to the Iran-Pakistan border. But the Americans are bombing civilian infrastructure, and very, very important, the connectivity corridors that are very important inside Iran and linking Iran with BRICS members, mostly Russia and India. So this post that I made, the internal bombing was crucial and extremely perverse, because this is the day where, since yesterday night, in the middle of the night, billions of pilgrims were taking the train from Tehran to go to Mashhad, because today in Mashhad is the definitive burial of Ayatollah Khamenei and members of his family in the shrine of Imam Reza, which is one of the most extraordinary shrines on the planet. And of course, the Americans bomb the railway. What else? This is what Americans do in war. This is what the baboon of Barbaria loves to brag about. So this was bombing an inside node in a connectivity corridor inside Iran. But it goes way beyond that, because they bombed a bridge, which is more or less 40 kilometers from the Iran-Turkmenistan border, which is part of the railway that goes from Iran, crossing the border to Turkmenistan, and then through the Central Asian stands to Xinjiang in Western China. This is the Iran-China railway, which was bought and paid for and built by the Chinese. So this is the Americans bombing BRICS integration, Eurasia integration, with the Chinese angle. But they also bombed Eurasia integration with a Russian and Indian angle, which is bombing the port of Chabahar in Sistan, Balochistan, near the Iran-Pakistan border, not far from the port of Gwadar in the Pakistani side, 80 kilometers between them. And Chabahar is the key. Chabahar is way to the east of the Persian Gulf. Chabahar is in the Gulf of Oman, almost in the Arabian Sea. So this is one of the key planks of the international north-south transportation corridor, Russia, Iran, India. It was the theme of the documentary that we shot last year. When we went to Chabahar, we talked to the authorities. We had green light to go everywhere. We saw the Chinese cargoes coming. We saw the Indian cranes. We discussed the possibilities of Chabahar becoming almost like a replica of Shenzhen in the near future. What do the Americans do? They bomb a key connectivity corridor linked to the Russia, Iran, India New Silk Roads. So this is what the empire does. You know, it's a bunch of grifters and Tony Soprano people. They are a bunch of a low-life mafiosi. They're very, very dangerous. They're out of control, and of course, they're angry. The president of the United States is an angry animal because he's totally cornered. He has nowhere to go. When he's offered an off-ramp, which is the memorandum of understanding, which he signed, the 14 points at the Palace of Versailles, side by side with the piece of shit, Le Petit Roi here, the king of this thing where I live. And 2 weeks later, he says, no, I don't want it anymore. Maybe I don't want to make a deal with them. They're scum. I'm quoting him. He said, these people are scum. So basically, this is self-projection. This is the president of the United States talking like Roy Cohn, the scumbag who taught him about how to deal with everybody. This is it. This is beyond disgusting. So he blew up the memorandum of understanding. Until a few days ago, many of us were even playing around, okay, is the MOU cat alive, dead, or in a coma? And most of us were saying, yes, it's comatose, but it's not dead yet. Now it's dead. And it was killed by the president of the United States. And the Iranians know it, and the Iranians don't care anymore because they never believed that this was for real. They identified the MOU as basically the United States playing for time. And that's exactly what they were doing, and they will continue to do. And now it's back to the escalation ladder. And now we are right in the middle of the escalation ladder that we all so naive from all of us to believe that the memorandum of understanding would somehow bring them to discuss it at the table. So Danny and all of you, this is immensely distressing, of course, predictable as it could be. In the case of what we were trying to follow, which was the role of the Pakistani mediators. And that translates to Larry and I in our new channel, which Danny was on Transition Protocol yesterday. So Larry and I were getting information directly from the Pakistani mediators, and we were trying our best to place this into the context of, look, they're breaking their backs to try to make this MOU work, with, of course, help, direct and indirect, from Qatar, from Oman, eventually from Turkey far away, certainly backing from China in the background. But now this whole thing is collapsing. So today, as we speak, then, in fact, after I talk to you, maybe in 2 hours from now, it's something that Larry and I are trying very hard to get some sort of reconfirmation. We have a confirmation, but both of us said, look, this is not good enough. We need a certified confirmation. According to one of our Pakistani sources, it is Trump that is begging the Pakistani mediators to get Iran back into the negotiation table.
It's wild.
This is as wild as it. I agree with you, Danny. This is as wild as it gets. But I told our sources in Islamabad, guys, we need at least a quote from somebody at the table he has to bet his ass that this is exactly what's happening. Of course, there are rumors about it everywhere, but we need a surefire confirmation that this is exactly what Trump is doing. And of course, he's posing as macho man, bombing installations, military and civilian, all across Iran. And this will probably continue tonight after we speak. So this is where we are at the moment, which is very distressing for all of us. We are back to the escalation ladder.
Yeah, we definitely are. And it is getting quite barbarous, as you have put it, Pepe. Donald Trump shared this about Chabahar. This is, by the way, from the 12-Day War, that image. And he said, this is in retribution for yesterday's bombing. This is not an image
from yesterday, right?
No, it is not. It is from the 12-Day War, but Trump shared it on Truth Social like it was. It's in retribution for yesterday's bombing of ships by Iran. If it happens again, it'll get much worse. And then with your report of Trump being the one begging Pepe regarding the getting back to the table, this is what Trump had to say to the media when he was questioned about this.
We have many ways we can win, but we've already won militarily. They have very little. They have very little left, and they want to make a deal so badly. They called a little while ago. They want to make a deal so badly. I just don't know if they're worthy of making a deal. I don't know that they're going to honor the deal. That's the problem.
So Trump claims the exact opposite, which is Iran is big.
He's lying. And Arakshi posted on X essentially saying that he's lying.
Yeah.
Arakshi is in the negotiating table. So he knows exactly what he's talking about. And this confirms what we heard from our Pakistani guys as well. So that's why we would love to have an extra confirmation that this is exactly what's happening. He's posing as macho man while begging, okay, let's restart the MOU. But the difference is that now the political leadership in Iran, not to mention the IRGC high levels, and even more important, which is something that we have this for sure from somebody who is he is among the deciding circle around Mojtaba Khamenei, that there are going to be big changes. If the Americans don't stop bombing Iran, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And this decision comes directly from Mojtaba Khamenei. So this week is very peculiar because the whole apparatus of government in Iran was involved in the funerary rites, the ceremonies, talking to the foreign delegations, going to the streets of Tehran, you name it. This ends today, Thursday. Tomorrow is a completely different story. So tomorrow there's going to be a high-level super meeting with everybody that counts in Tehran. I'll say, okay, the escalation ladder is back. He's bombing our installations, military and civilian now. So what is our response? Our response cannot be only to bomb Al Udeid base in Qatar, bomb Kuwait, and that's it. And we don't even bomb Qatar because we had a deal with Qatar that they are helping us to get our money, so we cannot bomb them. But does that hold? Is Qatar playing a double game? Is Saudi Arabia playing a double game? Can we trust both or not? Probably not, in fact. So this is going to be debated in detail tomorrow in Tehran. So we're going to have developments this week or next week, in which the echoes that we are getting is that it's going to become much more hardcore in terms of Iranian response. And of course, very important, Danny, the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain blocked, period. If you don't agree to negotiate with the IRGC Navy and the Persian Gulf Authority, you won't cross the Strait of Hormuz one way or another, period. That's it. And nothing's going to change that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about your evaluation of Iran's response thus far, because as you noted, it has focused mainly on Bahrain and Kuwait, with one noted strike on Jordan. But in Azraq. But this, I think, is the more telling story, which is the Strait of Hormuz is now is essentially closed for good.
Yes.
There was about one vessel that was reported last night. This is a post from then showing it was a small Indian vessel. Some said it was a wooden vessel, so a very small wooden vessel. But everything's closed. The Omani corridor, so-called, has been closed, and I think since this time, maybe 2 total have crossed, and the rest have either stayed put or turned off their transponders in the hopes of not being seen as they lay in waiting. So, Pepe, is Iran's initial retaliation mainly just about, the IRGC, Iranian officials have said that they have mainly moved to just reclose the Strait of Hormuz. And as you said, there's likely more to come. I'm curious about your, if you wanted to give a more fuller evaluation of Iran's response and the impact that this is going to have, because going back into this day after day after day, there are a lot of risks, especially on the U.S. side, when it comes to the ticking time of, let's say, strategic oil reserves.
Exactly. Well, there are several possible scenarios in parallel, Daniel, what could happen. There is already a discussion among very good Iranian analysts. Forget about Westerners. Is Iran being too timid in their response at the moment? This is one vector. The other vector is, look, they should respond in kind to the Americans and attack American assets a little bit everywhere across the Persian Gulf, no matter where they are, and even including American maritime vessels. So this is the more hardline version. But there is a third vector, which is basically saying, no, strategic patience still should be the number one imperative, because we have to look at what could happen in a month from now, or especially from end of July, mid-August, which is the critical date about the depletion of the strategic petroleum reserves. And then the baboon of Barbaria is going to be completely cornered. And on top of it, with the Strait of Hormuz not opening, remaining under total Iranian control, there's no way out for him. So we have different ways that Iranian analysts are looking at it. It's all of these vectors have pros and cons. But there is also one message that we're trying to confirm an information that is immensely critical. There was, I think there was at least one post on X coming from a member of the Majlis, where he was basically in a terse language, he was saying this, he published it in Farsi, and the English translation may not be extremely accurate. He was basically saying, if we are attacked again by the Americans, we're going to start discussion our self-exclusion from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. And we all know what that means. The thing is, everything is in place for this to happen legalistically in Iran. If Iran decides to do that, and there is a period of this has to be formalized, they can do it. And after that, all bets are off. And that would include a revision of the Iranian nuclear doctrine by Mojtaba Khamenei, the new leader, still invisible for obvious security reasons, but under extreme pressure, even from Iranian public, vast sectors of Iranian public opinion. Iran bombed again. Serious bombing of Iranian infrastructure. The economy is in dire straits. So, and if this bombing of strategic overland nodes with other BRICS members continues, is going to be extra problem for the Iranian economy. How long they can last, and what kind of dissuasion to end all dissuasions they could apply. this would be, of course, the possibility of nuclear dissuasion. It's something that Larry and I discussed in our previous channel that was canceled by the US government. It was part of a phone call by President Pezeshkian to Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, where the nuclear angle surfaced. So the nuclear angle could resurface again by a decision of the new leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, and of course, the fatwa by his dad will have to be revised. And if he does that, we cannot go wrong saying that he would have overwhelming support from all sectors of Iranian society. So that's how dangerous this whole thing is at the moment. There is a serious possibility. It's an information that will have to be reconfirmed again, but it's already on the table. And this, I wouldn't say threat, but this message to the Americans was relayed by the Pakistanis to the Americans. If you continue to attack us, you're going to pay for the consequences, and you won't like these consequences. So it's getting more and more tense and complex by the minute, the whole thing. If Trump thinks that he's going to play a game of chicken and with Iran, and Iran is going to chicken out, wow. Well, that tells you the level of advisors around him, right? Or even the state of dementia in his 3-year-old brain. So the options, once again, are, from the point of view of Iran, they know that they are in a very fragile situation, that the attacks on their economy are huge, but they still control, and they will continue to control the Strait of Hormuz, and they know what happens to what this means for the American economy and for the global economy in a relatively short period of only a few weeks ahead. So they have to stand strong for the next few weeks. There are ways of doing it. So from tomorrow, they will be calibrating how they are going to stay strong for the next few weeks, because they know that in a few weeks, for Trump, all options are closed. There will be no easy way out for what he caused.
Yeah, and it seems like Iran is already calibrating. According to tanker trackers, a report is that 10 million barrels of crude oil from Iran has been shipped out almost immediately, with the prediction that Pepe, the blockade, I mean, reinstituting the blockade.
The reinstitution of the blockade, which is quite possible. That's the only thing they do. Yeah.
And it's just, but what's almost crazy about this is what you just said is there is a time situation, especially with regard to oil and these oil reserves, which could lead to a catastrophic economic crisis. So, I know you have a column coming out soon, Pepe. Maybe you can help us understand the big ramifications of this and what you're hoping to put out there in terms of why this war has restarted and what exactly is in the cards here when it comes to the global ramifications of all of this, because it seems like time is really on Iran's side. The United States doesn't seem to understand that, or they don't care. What's your thoughts?
No, it's not they don't care. They don't understand it. It's much worse, Danny. I would say this is blatantly obvious. Nobody in the Trump administration actually read the MOU. If they had read the MOU, they would at least know that there's a series of commitments written, signed by the President of the United States. So you have to fulfill your commitments, and then we continue with negotiations for a period of 60 days, which could be later extended. So obviously nobody read it, because they start breaking the MOU from day one, which is the Lebanon dossier. And with this absolutely cheap provocation earlier this week of telling tankers from Kuwait, from one of them was from Oman, if I'm not mistaken, one from Qatar, 5 tankers in the end. Look, you turn off your transponders, you cross the Strait of Hormuz without giving a damn about the IRGC Navy. You follow Omani territorial waters, and we're going to be there to protect you. Guess what happened? They didn't protect anything, and obviously all the 5 tankers were hit by the IRGC Navy. That was inevitable. So what was that? Was a cheap provocation? Well, yes, it was. It was a cheap provocation so they could blame Iran, like the president of the United States is doing. They don't respect any treaty, etc. They broke it. No, the US broke it first. They did not respect what was written in the MOU. So they used these tankers so they have the perfect excuse to restart bombing Iranian installations and Iranian civilian infrastructure, which is much, much more hardcore. So they are specialists in basically breaking deals that they sign. So it's still the most applicable and perfect geopolitical definition of the 21st century by our good friend Grandmaster Sergei Lavrov. The United States is non-agreement capable. Russia knows that. China knows that. Iran knew that, but still they tried. But now they don't care anymore. Now they don't give a damn anymore because they know it's absolutely impossible. It's clear for them that there's only plan A for US Israel is destroy Iran, period. There's no plan B. So this means there's no diplomacy. There's no memorandum of understanding. There's no discussing modalities, etc. And this after a strategic defeat, Danny. Can you imagine if they had won the war? They lost the war and they want to inflict on the victor their prejudices and their unqualifiable lack of grasp of a geopolitical, geoeconomic, and military situation. What are they going to do? They're going to invade Iran? They can't. They're going to bomb Iran to smithereens? Doesn't matter. Iran will continue to survive and nothing's going to change it. They're going to provoke regime change in Tehran? They can't. Just look at what happened in the streets of Iran this week. There's nothing left for them. The only off-ramp is sit down and discuss what you signed in the Memorandum of Understanding. And they blow it up. So all of us, we are lost. We are at a loss of words and arguments and philosophical abstractions, whatever. But we just have to be stunned at how absolutely demented these people are. Well, they are. We know they are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that the United States and Israel are doing this again. I was surprised a bit about the timing of it, given everything that you just noted, especially including the oil shock and the economic crisis underway. I was a bit shocked at the timing, but I wanted your assessment. Maybe you can help the audience understand the Omani corridor situation, because this is, some people have said this is like a battle over the Strait of Hormuz. This the restart 11, 12 days ago, now even more intense in this current moment. And so help us understand, what is this? How did it come to be? I've seen some people on social media say Oman is betraying Iran, in this, but I'm curious on if you could help us understand the actual dynamics at play. And, it is a very precipitating factor in Iran hitting these tankers, and then, of course, Trump using that as an excuse to go back to war.
Well, I have, this is privileged information, and I'm sharing with you and our audience. I don't know if I talked about this before in other places, but I don't think so. And this we got from the people at the table. Don't forget that at the table, the Pakistanis are the key mediators, but there are inputs from Qatar and Oman. So what we heard from the people at the table is that for all practical purposes and in terms of what they discussed, the Emir of Oman and the high-level Iranian delegations that visited Muscat, they are on Iran's side. But because they are a very small sultanate, relatively fragile, they cannot possibly say that out loud and antagonize the empire of bombing. I think it fits the way they are behaving. But it's complicated because I think one of these tankers that broke the Iranian rules set by the RGC Navy to transit the Strait of Hormuz, one of these tankers was Omani, if I'm not mistaken. So that's, okay, what is that? Double game? Betrayal? So this has to be clarified, and I'm sure the Iranians will be asking questions to Oman. Was that a private shipper decision, not coordinated with your government? Whatever. Was he bribed? You name it. So for all practical purposes in terms of negotiations, Oman is leaning towards Iran, but they cannot afford to antagonize the US directly. Or did the US force this tanker to go through the Omani territorial waters? It's very, very complicated, ultra tricky. And that's why this whole kabuki of the mediation per se, which Larry and I, we are fortunate to have access to what these guys are discussing on the table. But sometimes a lot of the information doesn't fit with what we see. So we make an effort to go beyond and say, okay, maybe this is so deep that we're just going to see this game being played later on, which is quite possible. The intentions of the mediators are the best possible intentions because essentially they are, because they enjoy the trust of the Iranians and because they have theoretically Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia behind them as well in terms of the MOU cannot fail. We have to, by all means necessary, prevent that barbarian from restarting the war, which is what he's doing this week already. But there's lots of stuff that is lost in translation, Danny, and lost in the shuffle. And sometimes it doesn't add up. Just to give an idea to all of you, our audience, how complicated this stuff is. So, for instance, there are a lot of people, and I respect their opinions. They said, how can from one day to another you start believing or trusting Saudi Arabia and Qatar? That's a very, very good question. Because, okay, the only rational answer to this question is that they are looking at the way the chessboard is moving, and they know that they have to change their positioning because the wind is blowing towards Iran as a big power in West Asia. So what are you going to do? You're going to go against it. So that's the only logical, rational explanation. I'm not saying this is the only explanation. There may be others. And playing a double game could also be part of the whole thing. No question. We don't eliminate any hypothesis. Just to give all of you the measure of how tricky and tense the whole situation is, and who you're going to trust, wow, it's beyond complicated. We all know, and I'm sure all of the players in West Asia know who they cannot trust. That's more than obvious, right?
Right. Yes, definitely. Then the question is for you, Pepe. I wanted to ask you about the United States' particular target bank here is very focused on the Persian Gulf, the southern Iranian coast, Sarak, Keshem, Bandar Abbas, and some have speculated that this could be because perhaps the United States is actually angling toward a possible ground invasion of some kind to capture some island. I mean, Karg is always the one that comes up. Some have said maybe Keshem Island as some kind of, fantastical idea of having some enforcement over the Strait of Hormuz. What do you make of that kind of potentiality because Trump, for all of his major flaws and all of what he represents in terms of dishonesty, it is something he constantly brings up when war restarts. So what's your thoughts on this?
Casham is absolutely out of the question. It's hyper protected. You have everything, anti-everything position all across Casham. And what are they going to do? They take over Casham, and how do they get to the mainland? There's no way, because the southern part of the Persian Gulf bordering Kashmir is ultra highly protected by the RGC Navy as well. Karg is very far away. What's the point? I'm very worried about Chabahar, because Chabahar would be essential in terms of the Americans reinstating their blockade. But if they reinstate their blockade, they are the ultimate losers, because then nothing will move out of the Strait of Hormuz, which is exactly what the Americans seem not to want. In fact, we don't know, but apparently they want the Strait of Hormuz unblocked. So if they block it again, it's their fault. And of course, this will have enormous repercussions among the Asian customers of everything that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. There will be a rebellion of the Asian customers. Some of them are, let's say, American colonies. Certainly not China. China is different. But if China sees that Iranian tankers are blocked by the Americans from going to China, or Chinese tankers are blocked by the Americans up to the east of the Strait of Hormuz, they're going to the east of the Persian Gulf in Chabahar, they're going to do something, obviously. So all the options in terms of a possible ground invasion, for what? And you won't control anything. And the Iranian response are going to be, in terms of harassing these so-called American forces that managed to establish a bridgehead somewhere, it's going to be hell. This was already gamed, and this was already gamed, Danny. And the Pentagon knows that what kind of hell will be over there.
Yeah,
so all options for them are absolutely lousy, and they still insist in bombarding the only option that will be, relatively manageable. But of course, to start with, let's try to get into the minds of these gangsters.
Mm-hmm.
To accept the memorandum of understanding is essentially, in a glorified way, accepting your strategic defeat.
Yeah. Because
you did not set the terms of the MOU. Iran did. The 14 points are the 14 Iranian points, not your American points. Right. Psychologically for them, is out of the question. They will never accept it. And this is something that the Iranians should have foreseen from the beginning. In fact, many among the leadership did. For instance, everybody in the IGC said this MOU is bullshit. But Arakshi, Kalibaf, Pezeshkian, and of course, very, very important, which is something that could change starting tomorrow. The best version that we have coming from people close to Mojtaba's inner circle is that he deferred the decision about the ceasefire and the MOU to the Supreme National Security Council, 13 members. At least 2 of these are progressives, including the president Pezeshkian. The other ones are mostly IRGC or IRGC linked. They are much more hardline. But even then, in the end, essentially Mojtaba told them, look, if you have a solid majority, go ahead. I bless your decision. So I think this is the best possible public version of what happened. But now he can change his mind, because everybody's seeing for themselves that the Americans blew up the MOU that they signed. So what's the point of even continue to discuss an MOU? Until the beginning of this week, we were according to the echoes that we had, okay, there's a tentative date, Saturday, July 11th, for the delegation from the U.S. delegation for Iran to go to Islamabad and restart the negotiations. But this was practically a done deal before the Americans decided to blow it up. So now we restart with the Dead Cat MOU, in fact, right?
Yeah, and Pepe, there's really only been one force that's been outside of Iran. I guess when we look at the war initiators, there's only been one force that's been very consistent in their position on restarting the war, and that's been Israel. Israel's defense ministry said that they are ready for round number 3. They even named it as a round 3 of war. We know that they're participating in these strikes. When I heard 2 days ago, when was it, 48 hours ago, the U.S. started conducting strikes again, my first thought was, Israeli and American so-called decision makers thirsty. I think they were very thirsty at the prospect of even hitting the funeral itself. I don't have evidence of that, but I'm sure if they felt like they could, I think they were maybe a little too scared of Iranian air defenses. But if they, I feel like a lot of this has to do with the funeral. It's how big it was, what was being said there. The ships, of course, the Trump administration is going to make a big deal about the tankers being hit. But why were they going through that corridor in the first place during this? It was an obvious provocation. And obviously, the United States has a lot to do with why they were going through that corridor. So, Bebe, what are your thoughts on this? The connection between the timing of these strikes and the funeral, I can't be lost here.
Of course not, because this is also a diversionist tactic, right? They obviously, anybody with a bloody smartphone can see that these images are all over the planet, especially all across the global south. In terms of a popular manifestation of national.
Oh, Pepe, I think we lost you. If you come back, you were saying everyone can see this is a popular manifestation of national, and then we lost you. So hopefully Pepe is able to return. Pepe, you're back, I think.
Yes, I'm back.
I can see you.
Why my Wi-Fi is good? My Wi-Fi went crazy. Now it's back. I'm so sorry.
No, you were saying this is a manifestation of popular, national, and then you got
popular, exactly. Popular respect, national cohesion, popular solidarity, paying tribute to the life of a spiritual, religious, political leader that started as a revolutionary. In fact, a friend of the global south, respected all across the global south, and irrespective of political persuasions, social classes, people from the big cities, from the rich neighborhoods to the poorer neighborhoods, from the provinces everywhere. Not to mention in Iraq, where people from all over Iraq, not only from Najaf and Karbala, which are two relatively very, very, very small places, but from all over Iraq, this Shiite solidarity, Iran-Iraq, this is immensely powerful, not only in the Muslim world among the Ummah, but across the global south. So can you imagine the usual suspects looking at that and basically seeing that the people that they support in the Arab world, which is Salafi, Jihadi, Wahhabi minorities, in fact, total jihadists or Salafists and indoctrinated by online Salafists, etc., which are a minority, they were completely isolated. And you see this popular demonstration of Shiite unity in a funeral ceremony, rituals with something conducted with extreme dignity, with all these foreign delegations coming to Tehran to pay their respects, and the tribute. So this is an immensely powerful message, not only to West Asia, but to the rest of the planet. So they had to do something to divert the attention from it. So they start, what do? They restart the bombing. There you go. It's what they do. No? They kill women, they kill children, they provoke a genocide, they attack civilian infrastructure, they lie, they cheat, they steal, as some of their lowly functionaries admit on the record, and they start bombing all over again. Their president, that's what their president says all the time. I'm fed up with this thing. I'm going to bomb again. No deal with it. These people are scum, so let's bomb them. So this is and I like some of one of the posts that Arakshi wrote, which was something so elegant. He said, look, we're not going to reply to vulgarity with vulgarity. The vulgarity of the government of the United States nowadays has gone intergalactic, in fact. And one of the things that keep the profile of Iran in terms of soft power all over the world is that they are elegant, that they are extremely civilized, dealing with a bunch of gangsters, and they're not going to change. They'll not start hurling insults against anybody in the US. No, it's not how they do it. And when you look how they organize the ceremonies honoring their assassinated leader, how elegant the whole thing was. And this was recognized by the foreign delegations, that some of them sent delegations at the highest level. The Russians sent the number 2 in the government. They sent Medvedev. That's a pretty big statement. The Chinese sent a parliamentary, ultra high level delegation. So that's it. It's I would say that this is the ultra sharp contrast between civilization and barbarism. And going on a more pop culture note, we have the president of the United States who thinks that he can steal a decision in the World Cup, which is the number 1 sports event on the planet, by forcing the president of FIFA to cancel a red card, which is something that never happened in the history of football. So this tells everybody everything they need to know. That's it. This is the pop culture example of this is a bunch of fucking gangsters.
Yeah, and just the way that the Iranian football team was treated,
and the way
to travel in and out of the country. They couldn't even stay in the country.
And this, everybody in the global south, Danny, they saw everything that the Americans and FIFA together did to let's get rid of Iran. They did not lose a single match. So they exit with their honor up there, with the respect of the whole footballing world and the respect of the whole global south, because they saw what was happening.
Yeah.
There you go.
And this is a country at war. This is a country that just until recently had been under sanctions. Of course, those sanctions are back on, but they were only lifted for a matter of days. So here is exactly what Abbas Araghchi said. As you said, addressing the civilized and courageous nation of Iran with derogatory language does not diminish its greatness. Iranians are known for their civility, culture, and strong moral values. We don't answer vulgarity with vulgarity, but with action, fearlessly, with great valor. And Pepe, I think
right, please. Danny. This is definitely not war a lago.
Yeah, and I think Pepe, some might misunderstand Iran in the sense that people get really worried, as we all should be, when a major war is restarting. But I think there's actually a lot of calculations being made that are actually strategic, in the sense that while Iran, of course, views these strikes as significant and any attack on it is significant, we even have today, Tasnim just reported, as we've been speaking, that there has been the Mashhad railway line restored in a matter of hours.
Very impressive. They did that in a matter of hours, Danny. Amazing.
Indicating that either these strikes were either ineffective or not as strong as assumed when CENTCOM, pushes its chest out and Trump pushes his chest out. But also that Iran is very much prepared. And perhaps calculating exactly how severe this new escalation is, because it, as you said, it's an escalation ladder. It is not a dive. It is not a dive into the pool, so to speak. So your thoughts on this? I don't think a lot of people understand this in particular, because maybe in the U.S. and the West, a lot of times when there are attacks on maybe smaller countries or perceived weaker countries, that the thought process is, well, if they're not stopped ASAP, there's going to be a major catastrophe. I don't think Iran is operating along those lines. Your thoughts on this?
They are not. Coming back to what we were discussing a few minutes ago, there are different schools of thought and discussion in Iran at the moment on how should we proceed from now on. We keep strategic patience, we get a little more hardcore, or we go total hardcore. So there's, for the moment, it seems there is no consensus. This is being actively debated in Iranian platforms everywhere. And of course, the attention of everyone at the moment is on the funeral ceremony. So this is the last day. Starting tomorrow, the attention of the country, once again, will be totally focused on the return of the escalation ladder and how should Iran react. They don't take their decisions impulsively. This is very, very important, number one. Number two, from now on, after Daddy Khamenei, let's put it this way to be affectionate, is buried, now the whole responsibility is on the hands of his son, on Mujtaba. So how will Mujtaba imprint his total authority after, okay, we closed the previous era, we start a new one. Mujtaba is the leader. He enjoys consensual respect from the political vector and the military vector. The nation is under an existential threat, is being bombed again. The economy is in a very, very, very complicated state. So what will be his major decisions? And that includes, of course, how, from now on, are we going to tweak our response to the empire totally out of control? So this will be the big question starting tomorrow. And depending on what they will be discussing, we're going to see examples in how they're going to handle the possibility of a return of the negotiations mediated by the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis are telling us that they are doing everything they can to try to bridge the unbridgeable gap. Everybody, and that I mean everybody, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi, Qatar, Oman, Emirates doesn't count because Emirates, they are still at war with Iran and it's later. But the Pakistanis said, look, we're trying to get Emirates on board, but it's a long process. Everybody wants to, okay, let's have some sort of at least civilized discussion. Is it possible with this president of the United States? Everybody knows it's not, and they're still trying. So that's it. Now, in a certain sense, the ball is in leader Mujtaba Khamenei's court now. He is going to decide, are we going to continue with a variation of strategic patience? Is our patience exhausted? Are we going to inflict serious damage to the United States? Or we don't do anything. We just wait. Because we know there are a few deadlines that are totally adverse to the Trump administration coming. So that's where we are, Danny, at the moment. Big, big crossroads. Huh?
Yeah, and I'll just pull this up so people can get a sense of just how big it is right now.
Wow.
I mean, it's an incredible scene, and it makes me wonder, with all the videos circulating of Trump heads and Trump posters being stoned in Iran, and I just wonder if, are these strikes going to change their minds about the current situation with the war and their take on it, which is, revenge and getting justice for the crimes that it committed, not least the assassination and the murder of the supreme leader and his family, but also how about the thousands of others who were killed, the hundreds of children who were killed, including 168 in just a strike in Manab. So this is another factor I've been asking people to comment on, the people factor. Like, this is a big part of U.S. war, is to be able to push the internal situation inside of a country into either instability or a favorable political situation toward U.S. ends and Israeli ends. This doesn't seem to be the recipe for success in that arena. Pepe, your thoughts about that?
Oh, no, definitely not, Danny. There is a national consensus that you can frame it as revenge, but this is too a reductionist explanation. In terms of, no, they're going to have to pay for what they did. Right. They attacked us directly, unprovoked. They killed our leader. They killed a great deal of our political leadership. They bombed us. They continue to bomb us. They said that they will stop and they will sit on the table and discuss it. And they bombed the discussion over and over again. So how can we possibly trust? And the element of trust. And this is something that now you can see in some of the things that coming from the Majlis, coming from the Minister of Foreign Relations, and there was never any element of trust with them. We knew we couldn't trust them from the beginning. And now we have proof after proof after proof that they are untrustworthy. But what does that mean? We're going to have a system of no war, no peace lasting indefinitely. Iran cannot live with that. Iran cannot properly function with that. They need to start rebuilding. There won't be any closure, of course. And some sort of revenge about the assassination of leader Khamenei, this is something that could last for years, the process, until they get there. And they're very, very, don't forget, Shiites are extremely patient. They don't do things in a rash way, forget it. But in terms of normalizing life in Iran, they need it for the system and for the population. Right. And normalizing with the neighbors, which is a process that has already started. For instance, the normalization with the rest of West Asia is possible. The only vector that is totally impossible is, of course, the death cult, Israel. But nobody normalizes with Israel. By definition, this is impossible. But Iran re-emerging as a big power in West Asia and a big power in the global south, they need to start, of course, healing, rebuilding the relationships with the neighbors, the new security architecture of West Asia, which will basically involve Iran, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, essentially. So for all that to start moving in a, I wouldn't say high velocity, but at least some velocity, at least they have to make sure that they won't be bombed by the United States every week. It's as simple as that, And there's no guarantee. With this president, there's no guarantee. Because he does not respect laws of common, I would not even say diplomacy, but common sense. No. And even acting in his own interest when he knows that he has a potential catastrophe around the corner for his country, his economy, and the global economy. And he still behaves like a bloody, stupid brat with the brain of a retarded whatever. It's ridiculous.
It is. Pepe, this was a great show today. I want to make sure everybody knows that your Telegram, that your X account, and Transition Protocols YouTube channel are all in the video description below. After we're done here, I want to thank all the super chats. Peace Lover Forever. I know Skeet Sayer, you gave a bunch. I want to thank you for that. That's very generous of you. Thanks to this new member, Andre. And thank you to this. I won't spell that out. That looks like a bunch of names. But
I love the Viet
Hi, everybody. Today's Thursday, July 9, 2026, and our dear friend, Professor Marandi, is here with us. Welcome back, Professor.
Hi, Nima. Thank you very much for inviting me. And it's always a great pleasure speaking with you and speaking with your audience.
I want to start with what has happened last night, the U.S. attack. It was somehow strange because before we had two attacks in the aftermath of the signing of the MOU, two American attacks after Iran hit some targets in the Persian Gulf, in the Strait of Hormuz, tankers and vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. Then every time Iran attacked, the United States responded. Then we had Iranian retaliations and everything went down and just disappeared from the scene. This time was different. Iran attacked 5 ships in the Strait of Hormuz, basically from UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Then the United States responded. Then after Iranian retaliation, you see last night, again, the United States attacking Iran. We don't know what is happening. Donald Trump yesterday was so angry, the way that he was talking about the Iran is a cancer. We have to remove them. These are sick people. They don't understand anything. And this sort of trash is somehow name calling Iranian people or Iranian government and the people who are negotiating with the United States. But when it comes to the targets, last night, they killed more than, if I'm not mistaken, 14 people. And many people were injured in Iran by those attacks in the southern part of Iran. And the attack on Bandar Abbas, Sirik, and Bushehr was attacked. And basically, looking at the targets, they're hitting the same targets over and over in the southern part of Iran. And today, just before, in 2 hours ago, we were learning that Iran is still attacking or hitting some targets in Jordan because the missiles can get there or drones are getting there. It takes time to get there. But Iran attacked Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, and some reports are talking about Qatar being attacked by Iranians. And we had a new attack on Iraq as well today, which were some sirens. They said Victoria base near Baghdad airport was attacked by Iranians. This is the situation right now. Considering all of this sort of madness that is happening, we had the funeral procession of the late Supreme Leader of Iran in Iraq, which was one of the huge, in my opinion, what was the main concern on the part of Iranians. I thought last night that Iran wouldn't respond to American attack because of the funeral in Baghdad, but they responded last night. And today, we are witnessing the scenes of the funeral in Mashhad. So far, we've seen something like 4.55 million people are participating in the funeral. This is what's going on. And Professor Mandy, in the other footage that came out here today, it was the fighter jets above the city of Mashhad to patrol the funeral. And the background, the voice in the background says, "We want revenge." This is what's going on, and you see the red flags in the funeral. And go ahead, Professor Randy. What's going on with the current situation and with the MOU and the understanding on the part of two sides?
Well, first I should clarify that before the MOU and after the MOU, in every instance, it was the Americans who broke the ceasefire. Iran never fired at Americans. It was Americans who fired at Iran. The fact that Iran struck tankers is because those tankers were defying the Iranian Navy and moving through a corridor that was not approved of by the Iranians. And in accordance with the MOU signed between Iran and the United States, the Iranians are to provide the security and the environment for ships to pass through until the situation becomes normal, for as long as the MOU is valid. So those ships were being, for many days, ships were being taken in and out of the Persian Gulf through a corridor established by the United States. So the United States itself was undermining the MOU, because according to the MOU, the United States does not play a role in transportation or shipping through the Strait of Hormuz during this period of time. And this is just one of the US violations. The United States has failed to give Iran its stolen assets. It has reimposed the sanctions on Iranian oil. It refuses to force the Israeli regime to leave Lebanon to stop the killing. We just saw the day before yesterday, two more Lebanese citizens were murdered. The day before, 3 were murdered, including a school principal and her husband and their maid. So the violations from the American side are many, and we were expecting that from the beginning. We've discussed this before. Iran never thought that the Americans were going to abide by the MOU willingly. The Iranians basically signed the MOU because it wanted to be able to transport its oil and import goods during this period of time that the MOU is in place. And if the Americans choose to abide by other provisions of the MOU, the Iranians will also be more cooperative in opening the Strait of Hormuz. But if the Americans are not going to abide by their commitments in the MOU, then the Iranians are not going to carry out their obligations. It's not a one-sided affair. The experience of Iran with regards to the JCPOA was, I think, very key in the way in which the MOU was constructed. Back then, the Iranians carried out their obligations and the Americans didn't. And the Iranians were chasing after the Americans and constantly telling them that you're not abiding by your commitments, and the Americans didn't care. So this time around, the Iranians have basically created an architecture within which, if the Americans do not comply, the Iranians will not comply. If the Americans comply, the Iranians comply. That's basically how it is. So the Americans can't expect to be allowed to open a corridor, which goes against, I think, Article 5 of the MOU, and expect Iran to let them to get away with it. Because if Iran does that, then the Americans will go further and further, and they'll undermine everything. If the Americans think that they can refuse Iran from having access to its stolen assets, they're mistaken, because the Iranians know how to punish the Americans as well through the leverage that they have in the Strait of Hormuz. So everything depends on the Americans. The more the Americans cooperate, the more ships flow through the Strait of Hormuz. The less the Americans cooperate and the less honest they are about their commitment to the MOU, the less ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, in addition to that, there will be no negotiations about Iran's nuclear program and the sanctions regime, because Iran has made the precondition to that the implementation of the first phase of the MOU. And when the Americans are not implementing the first phase of the MOU, that means that there's no reason to negotiate or agree upon anything for the second phase. So this agreement, although it is flawed, I mean, I think I've said this to you off the record. During the 39-day war, I was advocating for Iran to continue fighting for a few more days. And during the siege warfare, and after the MOU was being negotiated, I was advocating for Iran to wait a couple more weeks. Why? Because I felt that the shortage of energy was that this was the Achilles heel of Trump, and that if we just waited a bit more, it would have strengthened our hand. But in any case, the Iranian, I mean, this is not a bad deal. As I said, the Iranians were very smart, and they had lots of tankers full of oil, which they swiftly sent to their Asian markets, because Iran has to feed well over 90 million people, and it has to bring in supplies. I mean, people can speak idealistically about, continuing warfare, but you do have to, you have to run the country, you have to run the armed forces, you have to support the axis of resistance. This costs money. So at the end of the day, the Iranians agreed to a deal which was favorable to Iran, because the Iranians did have patience. Again, I thought we should be a bit more patient, but they showed patience, and they forced Trump to accept a deal that was favorable to Iran. It could have been better, but it was still favorable to Iran. Everyone in the West says it was a capitulation. That's why Trump went out and admitted that they only had 4 more weeks of energy supplies. But in any case, the United States has not been able to replace all that lost lost supply, the supplies that are absent on the market. When it comes to oil, there is still a huge shortage. When it comes to other products that come out of petrochemical products and other products that come out of the Strait of Hormuz, there's a huge shortage, and that has not been reversed. And so the Iranians know that if the Americans escalate and start a new war, and no fuel and no petrochemicals leave the Strait of Hormuz, the United States is going to be in severe trouble. So it's really up to the United States to make a decision. Do they want to crash their own economy and the global economy by not adhering to the provisions of the MOU? Do they think that they can just get away with it like the JCPOA? I mean, it's different, and Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz is what makes it entirely different. So the smart thing for the Americans to do is to adhere to their commitments. Do I think they're going to do it? No. Well, I think you and I have discussed this many times over the past few weeks. I don't think they're ever going to willingly do it. But the Iranians are going to see how much the leverage that they have will force them to make a move. I mean, at the end of the day, they lifted the siege because they had to.
Yeah. Here is what J.D. Vance said about the situation.
Oh, by the way, Nima, sorry for just one thing. The clip that you showed showing Iranian Air Force jets, that's just another indication of all the nonsense that Trump has been saying about destroying Iran's Air Force. Iran's key assets are all very well protected, as we've seen with the drone and missile programs. Everything that is of great sensitivity was taken underground, and those bases have been built for these circumstances. And since the ceasefire, the Iranians have been expanding their underground bases and expanding their missile and drone program, and using new technologies for their defense capabilities. But these jets that were flying over Mashhad to protect the crowd are an indication that what Trump says is just nonsense.
Yeah. Let me play a clip of J.D. Vance talking about the situation between Iran and the United States.
So we came into the situation with maximum leverage and maximum strength. Their nuclear program was destroyed. Their conventional military was destroyed. And you've got some people within the Iranian system who are saying, you know what? We want to change our relationship with the United States. We want to turn over a new leaf. And the president said, okay, we will sit down at the table and negotiate and see if the smart people in that system can take over from the crazy people. Well, here's the basic deal that we cut. The basic deal that we cut was, we'll lift our blockade if you stop shooting at ships. But if you shoot at ships, we are going to punch back, and we're going to punch back harder than ever before. That was the deal. They said they would stop shooting at ships, and what happened 24 hours ago? They started shooting at ships again. Now, they were good. They were well behaved for about a week, but then they started shooting at ships. So the deal is very simple. If they shoot at ships, we're going to knock the hell out of them, and it's that simple, and that's the basic way it's going to work.
So the question is, why did you start shooting the ships?
I think what this shows is that those boats in the Caribbean that were supposedly taking drugs that they blew up were not taking drugs, and the drugs are still getting to the United States because he's obviously using something. No, that's not what the deal was. First of all, they lost the war, and they lost the siege war. And everyone who has seen in the West, who has seen the MOU, know that it's not favorable to the United States. In fact, in Iran, many people are saying we should have been tougher at the negotiating table, and we should have taken more concessions because the Americans were weak. And I don't disagree with that, but I don't think it's a bad deal. I think it could have been better, but that's beyond the point. I digress. So in this deal, the Americans have commitments, and so do the Iranians. The Iranians are the ones who are to normalize the security situation in the Strait of Hormuz, and they are the ones who are to normalize commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. What the Americans tried to do in violation of the MOU was to establish their own corridor. They couldn't do that during the war, and they couldn't do that during siege warfare. And Iran did not allow them to get that concession in the MOU. So it was Iran that was responsible for dealing with security matters and normalization in the Strait of Hormuz. And it's Article 5. Everyone can read it. So what the United States did was that they opened their corridor and then started encouraging ships to go through that and to ignore the Iranians. And the Iranians, for days, kept warning ships not to do this and warned the Americans to stop. For many days. And people like myself were saying that we shouldn't allow this to happen. And the armed forces, the government, the state, after much delay, I don't know if I'm connected or connected. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So after much delay, in my opinion, they finally struck a number of ships that were intentionally using the American corridor and ignoring the Iranian armed forces. So it's the responsibility of the United States, and it's the responsibility of those ship owners that were literate enough to understand what was in the MOU and to understand the warnings that were given repeatedly and over many days by the Iranian armed forces.
Yeah. Just moments ago, IRGC announced that they hit 10 targets in Jordan, or at least 10 ballistic missiles hit the targets in Jordan. This is the latest news, Professor Mahandi. And when it comes to the MOU, he's talking about the ships. Yesterday, we learned from, the military advisor of the Supreme Leader of Iran, Mohsen Rezai. He said that the United States is using warships in this raid. They're trying to use the warships, which is based on MOU. This is the red line on the part of Iran, and it's all about the commercial vessels, commercial ships, nothing of the military sort of operation in this raid.
Yes, the Americans have been carrying out a military operation in an area that does not belong to them. It is the Strait of Hormuz is not international waters, and the MOU is clear about Iran being responsible for security and for normalizing shipping. And it didn't have to be like this. The Americans could have easily had normal shipping gradually take place through the Strait of Hormuz if they just adhered to their commitments in the MOU. All the Americans had to do was stay out of the Strait of Hormuz, let the Iranians carry out their obligations, hand over Iranian stolen assets, and tell the Israelis to leave Lebanon. It's a sovereign and independent country. And shipping through the Strait of Hormuz would have been normalized. But they chose not to do that because that's how the Americans work. They sign a piece of paper, and then for them, the other side must abide by its commitments, but they don't have to. The Americans don't have to abide by their commitments. It's always the other side that has to do so. And Iran is not like the other countries that the United States deals with. Iran is not going to accept that. And it is willing to go to war. So when Trump threatens to murder us, to destroy us, to send us back to the Stone Age, the Iranians respond and say, we're not moving, we're not budging. So this is a crisis that Trump has created from the very beginning. And he is worsening the crisis because the energy shortage, as I said earlier, continues to be a threat to the global economy. And I think that the longer this crisis in the Strait of Hormuz continues, the closer we get to a global economic catastrophe. And the shortages have already been created over the past 4.5 months now. All it needs is a few more weeks, and it'll be catastrophic for everyone.
Yeah, New York Times reported that the U.S. forces struck over 170 Iranian military targets in the past 2 days, and this was reported, just came out from New York Times. And the other point is let
me at this point explain something. We shouldn't take this very literally and at face value. Many of the things that they struck have absolutely no significance. First of all, they've struck many decoys, and as they did during the war. The Iranians have decoys everywhere. Most of the things that are out there are decoys. Second of all, Iran's assets are mostly underground. They only bring them out when necessary. So most of what Iran had, when they say that they destroyed Iran's drone depots are deep underground. So there are no depots on the ground. They've been, if they were going to destroy our depots, they would have done it during the 40 days of war. So what they do basically is like a piece of metal that was put there to launch a drone. The Iranians leave it and go back, and they go and bomb that piece of metal. That doesn't do any damage to the Iranian armed forces. That's a piece of metal that can be replaced in 2 minutes. So by destroying decoys and pieces of metal and civilian infrastructure, by bombing people's boats, that's not destroying. They can pretend that these are all ships and speedboats that belong to the Revolutionary Guards. But anyone who looks at the images can see that these are mostly boats that belong to ordinary people. And the Americans know that. But they don't care about ordinary people, just like they attack the railway and the bridge near Mashhad in the northeastern of Iran. The Americans are very comfortable with carrying out war crimes. And so what I'm saying is basically we shouldn't take anything that they say seriously. Iranian assets are well protected. They're deep underground. And the Americans were saying the same thing for 40 days during the war. And then after the war, gradually the information came out from the New York Times and the Washington Post to a degree that what we were saying beforehand was all true. We were saying that no, Iran's missiles and drones were not damaged. And then weeks later after the war, the Americans themselves admit that, yes, we are right.
Yeah, as you see in the picture, it's not the speedboats that were attacked in this photo that came out just 2 hours ago. It shows that those boats that are used for fishing or something like some sort of activities by civilians.
And they know it. And they know it. No one should think, no one should imagine for a moment that the Americans got it wrong. No, that was intentional.
Yeah. And IRGC, the statement of IRGC says Iran has secured and partially reopened the Strait of Hormuz, bringing traffic back to about 50% of pre-war levels, with ships needing IRGC Navy permission to pass through Iranian designated routes. Yeah. And it says that foreigners have no share in this land and in the Strait of Hormuz. It warns that the United States has no right to interfere in Hormuz traffic routes, and any American adventurism will face a harsh response and could disrupt the reopening, harming countries that rely on the strait. Do you think that if the escalations continue and maybe the blockade, because we've learned that Iran overnight, at least from the reports that we've learned from Tanker Tracker, it says more than 10 million barrels were exported overnight last night because Iran was fearing the blockade of the United States. Do you see the blockade happening or Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz? What would be that condition? Iran is going to close the Strait of Hormuz, or they're going to wait for the United States to see what the United States is going to do? They're going to come out with the blockade and Iran is going to respond to that.
Well, we have to always remember that Iran never closed the Strait of Hormuz. And it was always open, even during the fighting, during the war, the hot war. Ships that were not from countries that were hostile towards Iran, they would pass through the strait. So Chinese ships, Russian ships, we saw Pakistani ships or Indian ships or Bangladeshi ships and so on. Japanese ships even, they would pass through the strait. The countries that were involved in war against Iran, like the Saudis, the Emiratis, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, in the Persian Gulf, they were the ones who were not allowed to use the strait for obvious reasons. They were waging war against Iran. In fact, last night and the night before, the United States was using their airspace. It was using their bases. It was using their assets to strike Iran. So these 5 countries are involved. Qatar, deeply involved. Kuwait, deeply involved. Saudi Arabia, all of them. So, but even now, like in the past, Iran has not shut the Strait of Hormuz. But it will not allow the Americans to control the strait. That was something that Iran made clear. It was the Americans that effectively shut the Strait of Hormuz when they imposed the siege. But even then, Iran allowed ships from countries that were friendly, except for on days when there was heavy fighting, to leave the strait. So right now, the Iranians have not shut down the strait. But if the Americans impose a siege, then that will change things. Then the flow of traffic will go down immensely, and the global economic crisis will become more imminent.
Here is the new footage, Professor Randy, coming out and showing that the same thing, that proving what you've just said about the Americans hitting the civilian boats in close to the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, here you see the new footage that shows that they hit the civilian boats. And do you think, Professor Marandi, that with the new activities that are happening, because we had some reports that Iran is sending forces to the Iraqi border, and it seems that there are some sort of activities on the part of the Iraqi Kurdistan. Can you hear me, Professor Marandi?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. And even we had one of the Iranian commanders talking about making a buffer zone, a security zone. at the border with Iraqi Kurdistan. Is that going to happen? And how serious is that for Iran?
I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen or if that's just a threat to make sure that the Iraqi government enforces its authority, and so that the Kurdish government in the northern Iraq enforces its authority over the border area, because these terrorist groups have bases alongside the border, and the Iraqi government knows this, and the Kurdish government in Erbil knows this quite well. The Americans fund them, the Europeans support them, the Israelis, of course, help them, and they are tolerated by these authorities. So the Iranians are striking them nowadays, as we've seen during the last few months. They've been striking them with missiles, but mostly drones. And now I think that this is a threat that either should be taken seriously, or that it may be enforced, or that it's basically for now an attempt to push the Kurdish authorities in northern Iraq to bring an end to the presence of these organized terrorists alongside its borders. So it may be that Iran is planning to carry this out, or it may be that the Iranians are saying this to make sure that they change to force them to change their policy, but that if they don't do so, then they may move in. That's what, unlike Turkey, which has bases all over Iraq and Syria, even though the Iraqis and the Syrians, have never approved of it, the Iranians do not have any bases in northern Iraq, not a single base, not a single soldier. So Iran doesn't want to do this. But at the same time, Iran will not tolerate the Kurdish government in northern Iraq to collaborate with the Israeli regime to destabilize northwestern Iran in collaboration with these with the Israeli regime at a time when the United States is attacking Iran. And we've seen an increase in terrorist attacks both near the Kurdish areas, but also near the Pakistani border as well, where the Takfiri groups that are supported by Western intelligence agencies have carried out a couple of assassinations in the last few weeks.
Donald Trump yesterday said that the Turkish government helped them more than many countries in the region and outside of the region. What is the perception on the part of Iranians, the way that Turkey may help the United States during the war?
Well, Turkey has always helped the United States in its policies in our region. Turkey, under Erdogan, Trump said that Erdogan is more faithful than other leaders whom he expected more of, meaning implying the Europeans. So he's saying that Erdogan has been better for Trump than the European leaders. And that is a very damning statement, especially since the Turkish people are completely against the policies of the United States and they oppose the Israeli regime. But we've discussed this before. Throughout the genocide, Erdogan has continued to transport oil from Baku to his business partner in Israel, Netanyahu, to fuel the genocide. And during the oil crisis, that oil continued to flow. As we speak, it continues to flow. And statements like this by Trump, of course, make things even more painful to see. Our expectations of Turkey are that they would listen to their own people, and that they would cut off diplomatic ties, they would cut off business ties, and they would sincerely show support for the Palestinian people and the Lebanese people and the Syrian people, the real support. Turkey, under Erdogan, took part in the circus in Egypt, where they imposed a ceasefire on Gaza that was completely one-sided. And Trump there too said that Erdogan has always been there whenever I needed him. And Erdogan put his hand on his chest, which is very meaningful in our culture. So it's with great disappointment because under Najmuddin Erbakan, the father of the rise of the Islamic movement in Turkey, the trajectory was very different. And when he was sidelined, he did not look at Erbakan favorably at all.
That good.
At all. And if he had remained in power, and Turkish intelligence and the deep state and the West had not collaborated to sideline him and water down the movement, Turkey would have been I'm absolutely certain that Turkey would have had very different policies today, and the situation for the Israeli regime would have been very, very, very difficult.
Part of the calculation in the Strait of Hormuz is Europeans, and it seems that Europe, on one side, you see the vice chancellor of Germany saying that the stupid war is bringing a lot of problem for the economy of Germany. They couldn't improve their economy because of the war, and it says that it puts the blame on Donald Trump. On the other hand, you see Europeans somehow cooperating with the United States in the region, because part of that campaign of putting pressure on Oman, which was one of the main games of Rubio's visit to the West Asia. He did that. He came, and the statement coming out. Then you see Europeans coming in and talking with Omani government. What is that, and what do they want to achieve with Oman? And is that going to be militarily acceptable, or practically are they going to be able to practically change some sort of conditions in the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, obviously, Oman has been badly intimidated, and it has been forced to obey the United States and let the Americans open a corridor for themselves in the Strait of Hormuz. And the Europeans, their presence too, is a part of this broader project of intimidating Oman and also gaining a foothold in the Strait of Hormuz. That will not happen. First of all, the Americans will not get that foothold. If the Americans even start a ground operation, ultimately they'll be defeated. They can come in, take parts of the mainland, take islands, but they'll be defeated and they'll be expelled. The Europeans have no military capability at all to wage war against Iran. And their technology does not compare to that of the United States. Their military experience does not compare, and their economies are just a shadow of what they once were. And they're moving towards deindustrialization, especially Germany, because of their conflict with Russia and of course, their collaboration with Washington against Iran in the Persian Gulf region for the past few decades. So, and especially since the war in Ukraine is escalating, the Europeans have no extra money or resources to open a second front against Iran. And that's why Trump has been so unhappy with them. He's been much more happy with Erdogan, sadly, than he's been with his NATO partners. And that's why the Secretary General of NATO, whenever he meets Trump, he has to immediately start licking his boots because Trump is not happy with Europeans. So I don't think anyone in Iran takes the French or the British or anyone else in Europe that wants to flex their muscles in the Persian Gulf seriously.
Professor Marandi, today we've learned from the defense minister, the Greek defense minister, and he's asking, why is Iran attacking? Why has Iran attacked Saudi Arabia? Why has Iran attacked UAE or Qatar? And this is the country that somehow is cooperating with the United States in their attacks on Iran. And he's asking these simple questions. And do you think how deep is this sort of ignorance in in that part of the, the argument, I would say they're on the part of the United States, but they're not that deep about what's going on in the West Asia, or they're not going to. Well, what is your understanding of these people or these governments which are part of the war?
I think they know that they're lying. I think they know what the reality is. That these countries, alongside the Europeans, the Secretary General of NATO basically admitted, as he was, licking Trump's boots, that that the Europeans actually helped a lot with the illegal war against Iran. So they have a lot of blood on their hands, he says. He admits with great joy. But they know this. They know what the Saudis and the Kuwaitis and the Emiratis did. Without these countries, there would not have been a war against Iran. So these countries are complicit in war. It's clear as day. But they're counting on the ignorance of their population by saying that Iran started this or Iran expanded the war. Just like now, they'll say that the Iranians are starting this by just targeting ships in the Strait of Hormuz, without providing the context. And of course, many naive Westerners will still believe their nonsense. It's not like it was before, but still there's a segment of Western society that still believes that the Israelis are the good guys and that the Palestinian children deserve to be massacred. You do have that, that's why you have a segment of Americans who still support Israel, or a segment of Europeans who still support the Israeli regime. So he knows this. He knows how, the defense minister obviously knows what role these countries have played in assaulting Iran and destroying schools and hospitals and so on. But again, it's just basically to manage the public perception.
There were reports of 2 attacks on 2 bridges, one between Iran and Mashhad, the other one in Al-Qala in Golestan, which 2 are of particular importance because one of them is connecting Tehran to Mashhad. We know that today is the funeral procession in Mashhad going on. And the other one is the connection. The railway passes over the bridge in Al-Qala in Golestan that connects Iran to China and to Kazakhstan, then China. So these attacks were done by the United States, or there were some sort of internal forces or agents doing this?
I've not heard of anything except for the news that the Americans have struck these bridges, and it just shows that the Americans are not. The issue is not the nuclear program. The issue is Iran. They want to break Iran. And that was the project from the beginning, and that is the objective today, because that's what the Zionists want. So striking schools is a part of that. Striking hospitals is a part of that. Striking apartment blocks. And we've had a lot of independent journalists in Iran during the funeral ceremonies. And some of them are mutual friends of ours. And they've been doing reports from these destroyed hospitals and destroyed schools and destroyed apartment blocks and so on. This has nothing to do with the nuclear program. This has to do with weakening the Iranian people, breaking the Iraqi people. Why do they support these Kurdish terrorists in northern Iraq? Because why are they supporting the Takfiris alongside the border with Pakistan? It's obvious. Why were they supporting the armed insurrection a few months ago? This is to undermine Iran, and the war itself was to break Iran. And targeting a key railway line in Iran that links Iran to Central Asia and links the capital to Mashhad, the second most important city in the country, is obvious. It wants to intimidate ordinary Iranians, those who are going to the funeral, but it also wants to disrupt Iran's relationship with other countries, and it wants to break Iran's capability to remain independent and for the government to be able to govern society effectively.
Yeah. Israeli media just reported that preparations are underway for an immediate escalation. If if they start joining, they're cooperating with the United States, but if they come out in full and come out and attack in Iran again, do you think that Hezbollah and maybe Yemen would join the war?
Yes, I think that Iraq, the resistance in Iraq too, will join the war in Yemen. And this will be the entire axis of resistance. But if we have an all-out war and they start destroying Iranian critical infrastructure, the Israeli regime's critical infrastructure will be destroyed, and then critical infrastructure of the countries in these Arab family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf will also be destroyed. And we are in the height of summer now, and the humidity and heat in these countries is through the roof. So if the United States wants these countries to collapse and for the entire population of the Arabian Peninsula countries to leave, and for these regimes to permanently collapse, the way forward is to expand war.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Did you hear me, or did I cut off again? Sorry.
You're back.
Yeah. What did I say last?
Yeah, it was just cutting away. You were talking about the Iranian response together with Iraqis and Yemenis all together.
Yeah, and I was saying that in the Arabian Peninsula today, the height of summer, it's escalation. Iran will destroy Israeli critical infrastructure if Iran's critical infrastructure is attacked, but it will also destroy the critical infrastructure of these regimes in the Persian Gulf. And being in the height of summer and in a bunch of desert countries.
Yeah, it seems that you lost Professor Marandi. He's going to be back because I want to ask him about the border right now, because there are many activities, not only in Iraqi Kurdistan, we have it in the southern part of Iran, in the at the border with Pakistan as well. These are the escalations that are happening, and basically it seems some sort of fear exists in Iran today because of they think that the United States is trying to do some sort of ground invasion. And let's see, Professor Marandi is here with us. Yeah.
Sorry, Nima.
You're back.
There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that if the United States and the Israeli regime expand the war, then start striking Iran's critical infrastructure, Iran will destroy the critical infrastructure of the Israeli regime, but it will also destroy the critical infrastructure of these 5 countries in the Persian Gulf. And we're in the height of summer. With the heat and humidity in the Persian Gulf, if their critical infrastructure is destroyed, these countries will collapse. They won't exist anymore. And the people will have to leave. So it is really up to these countries in the United States to think carefully about the steps forward. We will definitely not be the ones to lose the most. And of course, this will lead to global economic depression as well. So the smart thing for the United States to do is to yank the leash of Netanyahu very hard, and to back down and implement the MOU. Otherwise, this is not like the nuclear deal. The Iranians have the ability to make life very difficult for Trump.
Do you think that Donald Trump, after watching the funeral of the late Supreme Leader of Iran, he somehow felt he has to do something about it? He has to attack Iran. He has to, somehow influence the whole atmosphere in the region by these attacks. What is your understanding of that? It seems to me, I feel this way, that Donald Trump is somehow feeling he has to do something about it, because he was talking about 45,000 people were killed. These are, and you see these huge crowd coming out in support of the Supreme Leader of Iran. And it's just destroying all the rhetorics that you've been trying to build. And this is huge for Donald Trump and his sort of ego.
Yes, I think that his response to the funeral in Tehran, and that was just the beginning. Then we had Qom, and then we had Najaf, and the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala, and now in Mashhad. I mean, the funerals are all extraordinary and unprecedented in the world, and each one of them is a phenomenon in itself. So his reaction was very interesting. Although then he tried to fix it by saying, "Oh, maybe I don't know, these tears were fake or whatever." But it was clear that he was very surprised, and that shows the strength of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It shows that it's people power that stands behind the Islamic Revolution and the axis of resistance. And the same is true in Iraq, as we saw in the funeral there, because that is a show of force in itself. That those millions of people in Iraq who took part in the funeral were saying that our cause is the same cause. Our road, our path is the same path. Our leader is the same person as the Iranians, as Hezbollah. So that's a huge show of force, and that makes the U.S. position more difficult to maintain in Iraq, but also across the region. So that could have been part of it. I was also told that the Americans have had casualties that they have not announced. There was a strike in Kuwait where apparently a number of American soldiers, the Iranians believe, were killed, and also an American ship was hit. I don't know how badly it was damaged, but the belief is that these together have made him go berserk.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
We have breaking news and exclusive news today, something you're not going to have heard anywhere else. I was actually scouring the news before we came on for this show just minutes ago, and I still don't see anything out there. We have information from Suleiman Ahmed, who is a podcaster and has a big presence on X, does lots of shows. You may have seen some of the videos. I've been on his show a number of times. We were going to have him on our show today because he has been, as far as we know, the only Western journalist that was allowed by the Iranian side to accompany the funeral of Ali Khamenei across all of its locations, not just in Tehran. We had one rare exception or view from Patrick Henningsen on our show, favorite on our show, but even he was not allowed to go everywhere. Suleiman was able to go to all of the Iranian locations and into the Iraq, and then to its final resting place today in Mashhad, the birthplace of the supreme leader. He told us, number one, we were supposed to have him on the show today, but the connection was so bad we weren't able to make it happen. I'll explain why in a minute. But the bottom line is, the most important thing, he said that there is evidence, and the people on the ground believe that Iran may be within 36 hours from the time he told me this afternoon from launching a major strike against the West, whether that's the United States, against the GCC countries, or against Israel. He said that they were being circumspect and weren't clear, but he said he saw that, in fact, the reason why he was not able to come on the show today is because instead of going back to Tehran, where he was going to get back and where they have relatively good internet, he was not able to get on a plane because Iran had shut down all the airspace. So they're not allowing anybody to fly anywhere. So he's actually having to get in a car, and he's going to drive 11 hours to get to Tehran. But before he did, we tried to get him on the phone, and the signal was so bad it was coming in and out. I really couldn't play that all. But there was enough for me to get one excerpt out. And then we had a phone call separately where I could talk to him and ask him a number of other questions. We'll talk about a lot of that. But this is a major issue. If Iran does what he's suggesting that he was told they may do in the next 36 hours, it could really change the dynamic and put President Trump in an even bigger dilemma about what he's going to do next. And either this war could explode into a new level, or it could see President Trump do what we still advise, even with this knowledge, and that is the walk away plan as the lowest cost way to preserve American national security and economic security. Let me show you, first of all, one of the things I asked him, I said, we've seen the videos of all of these the different stops along the path of the funeral, and we've even talked about, the people are waving flags and they're being very animated and appear to be angry. People are crying, etc. But I said, but that's just all what we see from long shots or whatever. What is it like on the ground? And what did you find out from talking to the people at these exercises? Nobody's talking about what the implications are, because I perceive, and this is purely a guess on my part, that this is solidifying support behind the regime like nobody could ever have imagined, ever. Not, and I definitely didn't, to such that it gives the government a lot more leeway to continue the conflict and not give in to the West. How do you see it?
No doubt. It's actually the opposite. I would say the people will be forcing the government to act in a more harsher manner, in the sense of they believe that the government is acting too softly. And so there's a few key points that I noticed while I was here. The first key point was, if you look through the streets, what you find is a huge number of red flags. So more red flags than there are yellow flags, which is the flags of the resistance, more red flags than the Iranian flags. And the red flags represent revenge. They want revenge for the assassination of the supreme leader. They want payback for what happened to him, and they want justice. And they feel like till this point that hasn't happened, that the Americans and the Israelis haven't felt real repercussions of their actions. And so this has been a consistent theme. I've interviewed a large number of people, and not one person believes that there should be a final deal at the moment. Every single person believes either go right back to kinetic war, as if there should never have been a deal, or people believe, look, we are allowing, we're trusting. This is the more minority. I said, we're trusting the negotiation team, because the negotiation team is well aware that Trump is not capable of making a deal, and in reality, it's a way of bringing money in through the ability that they had to sell oil, with the understanding that they're going to go back to war. So that's the first sentiment. And the second sentiment is, again, I spoke to a large number of people on the ground, people who from all walks of life. And what I mean by that is rich, poor, conservative, liberal. And all of them are unequivocally basically mourning the death of the supreme leader. And so it's basically what happened is, and I can't speak about what before, because this is the first time I'm in the country, but it seems like what's happened, and it could have been in the past as well, but definitely from now, that people have almost seen the supreme leader as a representation of what Iran is. And so if you're Iranian, you support the supreme leader. And if you're Iranian, you're against the killing and the murder of him. And so what's happened is, this is, again, everyone has coalesced together to work or speak against the killing of the supreme leader. And the third element is this, and I don't know if this is the bit that frustrated Trump a lot, because he did say, oh, they hate me and I'm on a list and various other things. Now, the list could be some Zionists within Washington who gave him the list, but what he would have seen is the visuals. And what I did see is, once again, the most consistent banner in all three events, without a shadow of a doubt, was about Trump. Like, it was bounty on Trump. We want repercussions for Trump. Obviously, some words we can't say on YouTube, but go after Trump. I'm choosing synonyms because we're on YouTube, but this is the feelings and the most consistent banners or posters that were out during all 3 or 4 of these events.
And that is one of the biggest problems. There's a number of things I want to talk about. Gary's showing you some on the screen there. He mentioned there about the red banners. You can see those. Not many people, and I'm being one of them, didn't really understand what those were. But you see, you can see what's written on that one right there. And these huge banners, these are not minor. We've shown you one. Gary's shown you a number of times. But you see that they're all over the place. And you see these flags that are on, and those are for revenge, is what they're looking for. And this was not a minor thing. It's one of the things he said really stood out to him in all the different places was how strong it was. And look, you got to remember that Trump was already held in a lot of antipathy, because in his first term, he assassinated their version of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Qasem Soleimani. And that was a huge issue, because he was an enormously popular figure inside of Iran, not just an effective leader in the government, but also a very popular person. So that was causing a lot of anxiety and anger already then because of a lot of the assassinations that Israel had done with killing a lot of, in 2025, they assassinated a lot of generals. They assassinated scientists along with their families. So lots of anger had been coming up for a long time. And then here, when President Trump not just assassinated the senior leader, he bragged about it over and over and over. And now then you've heard President Trump here in the last few days has said on a number of occasions, I'm marked, I'm number one. He probably got to do is look at those videos, and they literally show that on there. But one can imagine that he's probably getting lots of classified intelligence, and it would not surprise anyone if that was an active mission, if they wanted to do that, because you see the level of anger is just so high. Because one of the other things he said, and I'll get to this here shortly. Well, actually, he mentioned it in that one part there, was that it didn't matter what strata of society people came from, whether it was just regular folks on the street, whether it was the elite parts, whether it was somebody in between, middle class, high class, whatever. He said everybody he talked to was unified in that they felt that the attack on the supreme leader was an attack on them. That became synonymous, and that was not the case before. One of the things that I lamented so much is that we took a figure that was genuinely hated by many Iranians, and it was a lot of source of division within the country. And a lot of these protests that happened in January earlier this year, a lot of that was legitimate. Some of it we fomented, and we actually tried to stir it up and arm some of the people, et cetera. There's no question we did that because we bragged about it. You don't have to have classified information for that either. But it's also very clear that we piled on something that already existed. And I have some friends I have for many, many years here in Washington that were enemies of the state, that were kicked out of Iran and had been tortured in one particular case. And so they had a lot of antipathy for the Iranian government, and lots of people inside the country did too. We have taken those situations and by doing these actions and assassinating them and elevating him into martyr status. I mean, it's the equivalent of a sainthood, like in the Catholic faith here. I mean, we made a saint out of him in their vernacular. And now then you see that there's never been anything like it, certainly not in my lifetime. And from some sources I've heard that there has never been this level in terms of sheer numbers of people turning out for a funeral of any leader that's assassinated anywhere. And apparently the last time that there was when the original Ayatollah Khomeini, the one that was in charge of this. Sorry, Gary, if you can silence that other mic there, that would be great. Soleimani, this one was the bigger by far, many, many millions. And of course, it went not just into Iran, but even into Iraq. And apparently there were many millions inside of Iraq as well. And I think I showed you earlier today, there's some interviews on some Iranian media where there was Shia pilgrims from other countries that had come there as well. And they also were feeling the same way because they were feeling unified. And they feel that this is an attack by the West on their religion. And that's obviously that's the case, because if you literally assassinated them and have gone to war twice in the span of a year when we started each of these, that's a big problem. One of the other issues, he said that many of the people that Suleiman told me, both in that clip there, but also in some of the other subsequent phone conversation, is that the regular people you're seeing on the screen right there, they don't want a deal. Large numbers of them did not want the memorandum of understanding. They said, no, we have the leverage. Let's keep fighting. Let's keep using our missiles and striking Israel, striking America, hitting their bases. They were looking for payback. They wanted revenge for what had happened there. And they said, we have the advantage. Don't negotiate that away. One of the most interesting things he said to me is that in the original, the first funeral service that they had in Tehran, he said, of course, it was a solemn thing. And, there was lots of crying and lots of emotional thing and speeches by a lot of the people. He said the one thing that happened that he didn't expect was that there was one particular speaker that got booed at the funeral. Who do you think that might have been? President Pezeshkian. Because other than Trump, he might be one of the more reviled figures right now, even more than Ghalibaf, who was the chief negotiator. President Pezeshkian is getting a lot of heat inside of Iran because they think that he sold them out. or that they think that he agreed to a deal that they didn't need to agree to, that they shouldn't have agreed to. He got booed. That is crazy. But that shows you the depth of animosity and hatred. That led to some other things. One of the key things that he told me, and by the way, we're still hoping that he can get to Tehran tomorrow, and hopefully we're going to have him back on the show again live tomorrow, where you can hear all this for himself, plus all kinds of other things that he's discovered. And I'm only going to hit a few of the key ones here because we just didn't have that much time. There was a whole lot more he discovered in this time. And then, of course, if anything does happen in between now and then, he'll be able to give us firsthand information on that. But one of the things that he really knuckled down is that they are willing to suffer a lot. Now, we had Alistair Crook on our show early in this process. And I mean, like, I think in the first days of this war, we had him on our show. And because he has a lot of experience in the history in the region, he told us, listen, there is the Iranian people, they have a cultural history, thousands of years long. They have this ability to suffer, and just as a culture, and then also in their religion, that the whole Shia itself, even more than just general Islam, the Shia Islam, as opposed to Sunni Islam, is about suffering. So it's all about that their people suffer, and so that's kind of baked into their mentality, and they have demonstrated it. And he said back in the first few days of the war, don't expect the hardship to cause these people to start falling apart. Well, we ignored all of that, of course, in the West, and a lot of our leaders and people and so-called experts that go on television, they told everybody all the time, hey, you know what? Boy, the economy's doing bad, and they're not being able to pay their army. They can't even have enough food. The inflation's through the roof, and probably all those were true to some extent. Some of it may have been made up. We don't know. It doesn't matter, because they will suffer a lot. And now then, when you add someone who has a history and a tradition and a religion of suffering, and then you bake on top of that this incredible anger at being attacked, and now then, because of the assassination, we have elevated Ayatollah Ali Khamenei to a level that he never, ever would have attained had he lived. He would have remained a divisive figure. There was already, remember, the claim was, they're as weak as they've ever been in all their 47 years, right? They said that ad nauseum. That was always exaggerated, but there was always also an element of truth to it. So we took whatever weakness he may have had and just obliterated it and replaced it with concrete. And now then, it is unassailable. And one of the other interesting things that was really eye-opening that Suleiman told me was, he said, listen, even if when they say they want to go back to war, they mean they want to go back to war. And I said, yeah, but they understand even though we're limited, it's not like our bombs aren't powerful. We can blow up a lot of stuff. And if we expand it, as I think Reuters reported yesterday, that the White House is thinking, okay, those targets we've been hitting on Sirak and on Qasem Island in the Strait of Hormuz, those aren't having any effect. Let's take it somewhere else. Let's go into the cities. And you remember I said earlier on our show today that would be a war crime. You can't just punish the civilian population. Well, aside from the morality of it, it's also going to be ineffective, because I asked him, if we did that, when these people say that they're willing to go back to full combat, they understand that there could be a severe price to pay, that they could be harmed even more, that more of them could be killed. And he said, you know what? Everybody I talked to, and he said there was no exceptions to this. Everybody I talked to said, if half of our population were to die, but we were able to finally get peace and vanquish our opponents and our foes in the area, then that is something that we would be willing to do. Now, I'll concede, when just talking about that theoretically is one thing, especially in the emotion of a moment like this, where all your buddies there and everybody else is reveling in the same kind of emotion. It's easy to say that kind of stuff. It's a lot more difficult to do it. But here's the problem with that. If you're trying to say, oh, well, they don't mean it, they've lived it already. Anybody who was born from 1980 onward in the country lived through the Iran-Iraq War. 8 long years of privation. Hundreds of thousands of Iranians died in it. We've had Professor Morandi on our show several times. He was one of them. He fought in that war too. He suffered from mustard gas attack. Many others in his country did as well. Many were killed by it. So they remember. They know what it means to suffer, and they've been under all these sanctions. So When they say that, don't dismiss that, because this is a country that has been rallied together. I thought that there would be this rally around the flag syndrome, the scenario, when this happened. I thought it was logical, but man, even I underestimated how just almost monolith, at least for the moment, these folks have. And you can kind of get some idea of it, because just think about the United States. I mean, you can look back in history after Pearl Harbor and how that unified everybody in the country, that there was a lot of people that were against war and a lot of people didn't want to go into the war. But once that happened, everybody was all in, et cetera. Or even in our own history of 9/11, I have personal memories too. I remember the day it happened. I'll never forget that. It's literally burned into the fore of my mind. And I remember the anger that I had, that everybody in the room had. With, you saw it across the country. They're ready to go after anybody. They're ready to go to war that afternoon, et cetera. This is even bigger, because this wasn't just the symbols like it was for us, the symbols of our country, the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, somewhere in Pennsylvania, et cetera. This was their supreme leader. This was as though not just a Pearl Harbor. This was as though somebody came into the White House and assassinated the president of the United States. Even if it was somebody of the other party that you didn't like, that is the symbol of America. And I promise you, our country would probably have the same reaction here. So let's don't get caught up in this habit that we have too many times of demonizing the other side and turning them into a caricature, because President Trump tried that just yesterday, talking about how they're thugs, they're evil, they're wicked, and whatever, and like they're just automatons, they're just robots, they're not really people. They are really people, and they do have the same emotions that you have, the same emotions that I've had. And put them in a similar situation, there's very little that they won't do. Now, that's leading into, okay, it's one thing for the people to be angry, but it's another thing when you're talking about a war. You got it talks winning, losing. It's tactics. It's missiles. It's missile defense. It's how are you going to translate that anger into something that we need to worry about? Well, that means if they're willing to suffer and pay a price, then that means that their government is going to be willing to take more provocative actions, and they're not going to do. President Trump. Let me just play this. This is what President Trump said yesterday about here. Gary, we're going to do the one that says Trump Open. Where he was basically saying about whether or not we're going to have a negotiated settlement.
We have many ways we can win, but we've already won militarily. They have very little left, and they want to make a deal so badly. They called a little while ago. They want to make a deal so badly. I just don't know if they're worthy of making a deal. I don't know that they're going to honor the deal. That's the problem.
Now, I can't say right now with any certainty, is President Trump just lying because he said they called me and they want to make a deal so badly? It could just be a complete lie. Maybe nobody called at all, and it's just a figment of his imagination or a consciously known lie. I can't say. It could be either one of those. But whatever he may have had in mind, whatever is on his mind, he's thinking that they're going to be begging for terms. So people, unfortunately, in the United States, especially among his supporters, I don't know why, but they still believe President Trump, and they take him at face value, even though a huge portion, a majority of the things that he says are proven to be completely false and untrue, and just self-evidently so. This should have been one of them, but now I can tell you from this report from Suleiman on the ground that it's not. There is no begging for a deal from Iran. They are doing the opposite. They are angry at their government for having made any deal so far, which means that they're unlikely to make a deal. Now, understand the context. President Trump, before they launched this attack on the 7th of July, also rescinded the energy system sanctions waivers that we had. So we took that back away. We gave that at first, and now we've taken that back away. So as far as I've been able to ascertain, we still have not released any of their funds. President Trump said we hadn't yesterday. Of course, I can't take that at face value, but that's what he said yesterday, that we hadn't released any of the frozen funds. So if we hadn't released the frozen funds, if we have now changed the sanctions waiver release on their energy infrastructure, and if Israel is still in Lebanon, even though there's a quasi ceasefire there, there's been some skirmishes, but no big incident. But Israel hasn't left anywhere. That war is not over. It's just kind of in a suspended state. So none of those things have happened that the Iranian side said they need. Those are basically the top three. So where do you think that they're going to be begging for anything? Well, they're not. And now then they're saying, since we don't have any of those things, and you now took away one of the things that you had given us, which was the sanctions relief, now then you're providing Iran every incentive to go further. And that's one of the things that they're doing. Let me see. Let me show you this map that I have here to kind of point this out, because one of the other things that was really important that he had mentioned was if I'm not going to find it very good, I'll show this anyway because it's not that great. The Bab al-Mandab. This is if you haven't seen it, everybody's aware of the Strait of Hormuz, obviously, but there's also the Bab al-Mandab, and that is this area down here. Sorry for the map here, in the Red Sea. And this small area here, it's a lot smaller than the Strait of Hormuz. And he said that there is a lot of talk to get together with the sorry about that, to get together with the Yemeni people. They call them Ansar al-Islam. That's what we call the Houthis. Is that there was a lot of conversation and discussion about whether they would get together, the Iranian government and the Houthis, we together say we're going to have a unified section, and we're also going to close down the Bab al-Mandab, and they may even attack some of the Saudi oil that comes across that pipeline. They have an oil and a gas pipeline that goes across their country that allows them to transit oil out that way. That's one of the reasons why the Saudi, thank you, Gary, you see they can go up north through the Suez Canal or south through the Bab al-Mandab. And if the Bab al-Mandab is closed down, then that's going to require Saudi Arabia oil to go north up through the Suez Canal if that's not also taken under fire. And so if you shut off an additional, I think it's 3 to 4 million barrels per day on that, and you completely shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is apparently on the table right now. It's still going. I think there's 25 vessels that went through even today. Normally it was between 100 and 130. So it's still way below normal. It's not even a third. It's not even a quarter, but it's something. But if they shut it down completely, then we're going to be back to square one, right where we were before the MOU was signed. So Iran has apparently more cards to play. And they're also saying whatever they're apparently going to do tonight, they're saying we're tired of just this little, you do this, we do that. President Trump bragged about, hey, I did 20-1, and if they don't behave, we're going to do more. Well, the Iranians side are saying, two can play at that game. And so you start blowing stuff up like this, a lot of things can change. And listen, the reason why Suleiman is not able to be with us today is because he couldn't take his flight to get to where he had service, because the air service had been shut down because they may be doing something on top of that. Well, before we even got off the phone, there is being reports by Al Jazeera of additional strikes against Iran. Now, curiously, I saw a U.S. claim that was not us, that we're not doing that. But here's these reports of attacks in Iran, in the southern Konak Baluchistan province, which has become a really important place. So it's across from the Gulf of Oman. And then there's also in Bandar Abbas, which has already been hit a couple of times. These are, this is 10 minutes ago, 35 minutes ago, before we came on the air. That's when I captured these here. So apparently there's more going on right now. There's also some concern that if you don't get the Hormuz open quick, and this is also just now less than an hour ago, some of the concern is that one of these experts that Al Jazeera queried from the Middle East said there could be up to 45 million people at risk of hunger because of these disruptions on the international trade. And we've already talked to you about that too, especially some in Africa and Asia, some places that really have relied on the fertilizers that are not coming out. And we're talking now months, which a lot of that is either none or a little bit. And that's, once you miss the planting season, it's going to be a big problem. But just to show you the scale of what's there, look at that paragraph right above the blue one here. This expert says we need to sort out Iran's nuclear program, freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's interference in the region, Israeli attacks on Palestine. Lebanese and Syrians need to end that. And we also need to look at U.S. behavior in the region. I mean, all we have to do is get everything solved, and then everything will be fine. That just shows you how big of an issue it is. And now that on top of that, whatever difficulty we had before the 7th of July, when we started these shots here, is now enormously complicated on top of that. Because we could have gotten some of these things solved, but I still was arguing that we should have done the walk away plan. But still, and without going back into conflict, these people that are so angry and have all their red flags and whatever they want in revenge, they may be angry on the day, and especially during the emotion of the ceremony itself, that can cool down over time unless we keep it stirred up. So if they were already upset at their government for making this deal, and then now here comes President Trump boasting about how he's going to do a 20-to-1 shot, because according to the Iranian side, the way that they view their I don't have that one handy. The way that they view the memorandum of understanding, that paragraph 5, we talked about this earlier today, they interpret that as saying that they had, and that's actually what it says, that the Iranian side had administrative control even during the 60-day, and they get to determine the effective way to keep the strait open. Now, what was left to interpretation is what happens if their method isn't followed. That wasn't addressed in there, so they answered it themselves. We didn't like that answer, and so we chose to use military power. Instead of, if Iran hit 3 ships, instead of doing something commensurate with maybe taking out 3 boats and saying, all right, look, that's all we need to do, just go back to it. We didn't even attempt to do that, because President Trump doesn't think in those kinds of terms, logically, rationally, in foreign policy wise, diplomacy. That doesn't exist. His mind doesn't work like that. His mind works that I tell you what to do, you do it. I take, you give. What are your questions? That's how he likes to operate. And so he's so filled with arrogance and pompous presumption that he said, how dare you do something that I don't like? I'm going to kill you now. And I'm going to blow up a bunch of people and kill a bunch of your troops. And I'm going to do it 20 times bigger. And if you do something in return, we're going to go 20 times on top of that. Yeah, thank you for that. That's Gary right there. Yeah, you see that upon the side of the MOU, the Islamic Republic of Iran will make arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels. That's what it was. And they would charge no tolls for 60 days. But it said that they would use their efforts for the safe passage. They got to determine that. We left that open. We didn't specify. We didn't say it had to be this, it couldn't be that. We just signed it. President Trump himself did that. And now then he wanted to change the terms. He didn't like those terms, so he wanted to go back. And now we have what we have. And so instead of recognizing an error that we had made, that President Trump had made in signing that deal and trying to get that solved, instead he goes in big with a sledgehammer to try and do something that needed maybe a little love tap, because he doesn't know nuance. Now Iran has said, okay, this is provided ammunition to all those angry people I just told you, because now they're looking at their government and saying, see, I told you it was a mistake. President Trump can't be trusted. They said that before. They said that many times. They said he can't be trusted. Why are you not getting it? Look at what he's done. Now he's blown up more of our people, and he's gone back to shooting people. It's time for us to do something different. And that is why the risk that something could happen in the next 36 hours, something overnight. Of course, here's again, this is what we're bragging about earlier today, because we blew up a bunch of stuff. Nobody knows if this has anything to do with their war effort, but makes good video. And we claim that it does. It's more punitive than anything else, with President Trump just in anger striking out. Well, the Iranian side is saying to do some stuff and not just retaliate for something else, but to go bigger against the U.S. than they did against us here. And you can imagine where that's going to lead. It's not going to solve any problems. But if the Iranian people genuinely are willing to make the sacrifice and to suffer, they'll suffer a lot more than this. It's interesting also, Suleiman told me that because of the funeral and the focus on that, he said hardly anybody he knew even anybody that he interviewed was even aware that there had been the first round of this. It was not until this last round, the one you're seeing here on the screen, that they finally apparently became aware of it, and that made them really angry. So if it gets expanded into cities like Reuters was reporting earlier today or yesterday, may be coming later on, that's just going to add to their anger and their sense that they're going to suffer. I asked Suleiman, because he lives in the UK right now, I said, listen, British history and, the Battle of Britain, where in the First World War II, the Germans tried to bomb London out of the war, and they tried to basically be all these terror bombings and stuff to destroy the morale of the British people, make them feel isolated, and leave the war. And of course, is now famous. The exact opposite happened, and it solidified the British people and made them willing to suffer anything. And then you had Winston Churchill come and said, we will suffer on the beaches. We will, all that famous speech that he had there, and that galvanized the British population. And there's no price they wouldn't have paid. And we know how that worked out. There is no reason to think that just because these are Persians and that we don't like a lot of brown people in our country, just being honest, And President Trump obviously has contempt for them based on his description of them yesterday about how they're scum and all this kind of stuff. That's how he views them. So he doesn't care if he kills a bunch of them, because to him, they're not even, basically they're subhuman. But they care, and they are not going to be bullied the way that he has seen in the past, not like the Syrians were, not like the Venezuelans were, not like even the Iranians were in the first round of this in 2025. Those days are over. And I fear we may find out. So we'll see. Now, again, this is Soleiman reporting what he had talked to people on the ground. He didn't have an official statement from anybody in the Iranian government. So it's anecdotal information. We'll have to see what happens. But based on the people he talked to, there is a real possibility that could happen. And then the question that I ask every time, and then what? What is President Trump going to do now that he's opened this genie's bottle and he started this potential, not just tit for tat, but strike, more potent counterstrike, more potent return strike, and then what? What are you going to do? If the Iranians don't just do something commensurate, but they do something like Trump did and go above and beyond that, we can see from what I'm told that the first round of strikes, we shot 80 targets. This last one was about 100. So we've already amped it up from the last time. So now the question we're going to wait to find out whether it's something in the next 36 hours that Soleiman heard or something different. It's pretty unlikely that Iran is not going to do something, especially with all of that anger that you've seen built up there. They're going to be under pressure. That was the last thing I'll tell you is that was one of the things that stood out to him. He says he believes that now the issue is not whether or not the government can impose something on the people, but he said whether the people are going to impose something on the government that they don't want to do. Because he said he thinks that the people are going to push them into more aggressive actions. And if that sounds familiar, that's a lot about what may be happening in Russia right now, putting more pressure on Putin to go more. Not to back off, but to go more. This kind of dynamic we have created in both of these places, it may one day burn back on our own head. We'll wait and see how it's going to work out. I'm still going to hope for the walk-away plan, because that is probably the only thing that can keep that from happening, that can mollify that angry crowd to at least back down. May not do anything for him personally, because let's see. This is this is also from just before we came on the air here. This is the top commander vows retribution for the martyred leaders' killers sooner or later. That simple message is what they put down there. They published this right before we came on the air here, validating the likelihood of what Soleiman is reporting. So don't think this is going to go anywhere anytime soon, but I can nearly guarantee you this is not going to go well for us, and we are not going to come out of this as a victor. We have already lost. The only question remains, how deep is the loss going to be? We'll keep following this for you.
Cool figure. Follow me.